In this video, we're going to talk about field formatters, and I want to begin by showing you where in the Drupal user interface you can adjust which field formatters to use, and that will give you an anchor to figure out what field formatters are and their role in outputting content in Drupal. And then we'll take a step back and look conceptually at what field formatters are and how they work, and how to extend Drupal by adding new field formatters. Okay, so what I've done is gone to Structure, Content Types, and then Article. So this is the default article content type that comes with Drupal 7. Now field formatters come into play right here in this Format column as we're adjusting the output of the view mode of a particular node type. If we click on one of these drop-downs here, we'll see several options for how to output this content. So for example, this is the tags column, and we can output the tags as links to the particular tags. So for example, we can click on the link to go to the page that contains all of the content that matches that particular tag. Or we can output them as plain text if we don't want them to be links at all. We can even hide it. If we look at the body field here, we have some different options available to us because this is a different type of field. So I'm going to go ahead and click the drop down here. We have a couple of custom options here, which have been added through a contributed module called Custom Formats, which I'll talk about in a little bit. We have Default, which is the outputting of the entire contents of the field. So this would be, for example, what you'd use on a full node page. Plain text, which will strip out all of the HTML. And trimmed and summary or trimmed, which can be used for teaser output. So these are field formatters. When we're talking about field formatters, this is where you'd see them used. Field formatters can also be used when outputting content in a view using the Views module, using the fields row type. So in a previous video, we talked about using a view mode in order to render an entire node in a particular way, which can then be reused across multiple views. But sometimes we'll need granular control over particular fields inside of a view, in which case we can use field formatters in a way that allows us to create a output setting for a particular field and reuse that across multiple fields inside of views. So if we need to get granular, this is a way we can still make the changes to the output portable. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to go to Structure, Views, and we're going to take a look at the view that we were looking at before called Test View. It's just a very simple view. Now right now this view is using fields. You can see the different fields that are being used here. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is click the Fields body item. That will display some settings down here below. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to the very bottom of the configuration for this field. And you see here we have a formatter option. And if we click on this dropdown, we'll see the same formatters that were available to us when looking at the display settings for a view mode for a node. Okay, so let's say we want to adjust the output of a field and none of the existing field formatters quite do the trick. What would be the advantage of adding a new field formatter versus using something like a pre-processing function to adjust the output on the theming layer? The big reason why a field formatter might be a better fit is that Drupal has an API that allows you to add a field formatter with pretty minimal code. And so it would be a similar amount of code to what you'd see in a pre-processing function. But what it adds on top of that is the ability for various user interface components, which we just looked at, to tie in with those field formatters and expose those options to the site builders. So they can go to the view modes page and choose which formatter to use, or they can adjust a view to use a different field formatter. And that's incredibly powerful, whereas a pre-processing function, the use of one is going to be limited to developers and those themers with some PHP chops. We can instead open up that option to anybody who's going to be adjusting the output of the site through the user interface. Now, to add a new field formatter to Drupal, typically what you need to do is create a custom module that makes a couple specific API calls in order to add the field formatter in. But what you can also do is take the core logic of what you want to do in code and add it into a configuration item when using the custom formatters contributed module. So what the custom formatters module will allow you to do is to use a user interface which will tell you which variables are available for using inside of your formatter, and then you add your PHP code for adjusting the output right there in the user interface. So you don't need to learn the API. The API is pretty simple, but this is another option, and we'll explore it in a future video when we're looking at some of the simpler options to modify output to Drupal.